Working.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to And Action. This is our second episode. I'm Tom DiNucci. I'm here with my co-host, Mikey Messier. Mike, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Tommy. It's good to see you. It's good to be here. And I really appreciate the fact that the audience from last week, a lot of them enjoyed the show and are tuning in again. So that's great.
Yes, it's good to see some familiar faces on the feed. Today we're going to be talking about screenwriting, which is a topic that I get asked about quite a bit. Writing has always been something that I kind of can get lost in, and it's my go-to both as a passion and a way to make a living. It's a great way to kind of get your emotions out. It's a great way to tell a story. Screenwriting itself, it's a very specific beast. It's not like writing a book. It's not like writing a short story. It's a very unique creature. So
Right.
we're going to dive into that today. Today our topic is all about not just starting your first draft of your screenplay, but finishing it. I feel as though, like a lot of other projects that we do as people, we go out and we start a project up and we don't always finish it. And writing a screenplay seems like one of those things that, like, hey, you know what? I'm finally going to buckle down and write that script I've always been wanting to write. And I think people don't always take the correct approach, and then you're almost like failing before you had a chance to succeed, and the mission becomes quickly derailed. So today we're going to get into a few different kind of basic strategies to not derail your screenwriting mission, and how to just take an idea and go from start to finish and land it. We're not saying that you're going to take this podcast and then go sell your script to Hollywood and make $1 million, but at least you'll have some pages to turn in.
Right.
um, but before we get into that, what's been going on, Mike? What have you been up to? What is new in your world?
Well, for the last, speaking of writing, a different form of writing, I've been working on novels the last couple of years in this worldwide situation. And I'm very happy that I just got the hardcover copies of two of my novels, Fight or Play Basketball, and very happy with how it came out. It looks nice. My friend Benny J. Scala did the advanced praise page, and everything came out well. And
Yeah, it's
then
looking
I
good.
thanks. And this other one is A Distance from Avalon, which has been out for about a year and a half, but I finally got the hardcover copies going. Uh,
Nice.
so both of these stories were first written as screenplays, and then I adapted them into novels, which is kind of the reverse of how a lot of things happen, like Lord of the Rings or whatever. A lot of times people write the novels, and then years later, someone writes a screenplay. I did that in the reverse way, but I'm very kind of excited to have them done and looking forward to talking about what we're talking about today. I understand that you had some good news this week. I don't know if you want to share that, but you had some type of good news.
Yes, I had an audition. Last week we were kind of talking a little bit about some acting spring training tips, and I kind of got a chance to dust off some of those myself. And I auditioned for the first time in a little bit, and sent a tape in. And I am very happy to say that it's kind of funny. I didn't get the part that I read for, but I did get offered a really cool part. So we've heard about that like a million times in the past. You've heard these stories before. You audition for one part, you end up getting another. Um,
Right.
I'm excited, man. I'm so stoked to be a part of this film. I can't really talk too much about it now, but there will be an announcement in the not too distant future. And it kind of just goes to show you that, like, no matter what you're reading for, just bring it, because you never know what you might put forth in that audition that kind of makes the director or the casting person say, "Hey, you know what? I'm not sure about this one, but you know what you'd be good for." So it was cool, man. I really focused on it, and I was happy that I get nervous when I'm auditioning, man. I really do. Like,
Sure.
it's so funny because no matter how many times I've worked with some really big names, and I've gotten a chance to be in really cool settings and play a lot of really cool characters, but still every time I'm auditioning I get nervous. So anytime I can just, like, even on tape, it gets to me a little bit. So it was nice for me to get to overcome some nerves, put out a good tape. Didn't get the part that I was going for, but I did get a part that I'm
Right.
excited about, and that's kind of right at the end of the day. That's what it's all about, right?
Well,
Kim
that's
just
what it's all
chimed in.
about.
Our
Kim's a
friend
great
Kim, what's
person.
up, Kim? How are you? Welcome, welcome. Um,
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, see, Kim says the same thing. You know, you never know. You audition for one part, maybe you don't get that one, but you get another one. But you put your best foot forward, and good things are going to happen. But enough about what we got going on in our lives, Mike. Let's talk about what we came here to talk about. Let's talk
Yes.
about the world of screenwriting. Um, Now, Mike, I'm sure you've gotten this before. I get this all the time. You know, a lot of times new writers will ask me, they'll say like, how do you write like 90, 100 pages? Like that's just so many pages. Like how do you even begin? It's one of those things where, well, you begin with like a really solid plan. You need to have a plan. And I liken it to, again, like we were just talking about earlier when we started the show, and how like people will often just kind of get an idea for a script. Oh, you know, it would be a really good movie. And then they'll just start writing. They'll think of like maybe the main character and maybe a couple supporting characters, and then they'll just like dive in. And what happens is they're excited, they're enjoying it, they're feeling the vibe. You get about 20, 25 pages in, and the two words that kind of hurt every storyteller, it kind of hits you. It could be like a punch to the face. Now what? Now what
Sure.
do I do? I'm
Yeah.
25 pages in. I got a nice setup. I have no fucking clue where to go now. I have
Right.
no direction. I have no plan. So if you were going
Right.
to build a house, right, you wouldn't just
Hmm.
go to Home Depot and haphazardly start grabbing lumber and, oh, there's some 2x4s here. I think get that bag of cement. We might need that later,
Some
and just throw
bricks,
it in
some
your
random
truck.
rocks.
Grab a brick. Oh, I like that garden gnome. We'll put that in the lawn. You wouldn't
Yeah.
just grab a bunch of random shit and then go back to your property and try to assemble it. You'd have
Right.
a very concrete blueprint, and you would be aware of every single piece of material that you need, and you'd methodically plan it out, and you'd construct it, and you'd have a very nice house. It would take time, and you plan it out. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of like get into like how you can plan out and build your blueprint, and then eventually take that blueprint and build your house, which is your script. um, so basically, Mike, first thing we want to kind of talk about is like, well, what kind of movie are you even making? You know, I would never want to come on this podcast here and like thwart anyone's creativity. You may
Sure.
very well be the next George Lucas, and you may have the next great science fiction odyssey cooked up in your mind, and it may be big and grandiose, and it might be really special, and I would never stop you from doing that as a writer. But I will caution all writers that when you're trying to write your first script and trying to get some traction in the industry, and maybe even trying to produce that script yourself,
Right.
you want to pare it way back, and you want to think small, and you want to think little, and you want to think about things that you have at your access. You know, the old like, write what you know, write what's available to you. So again, you know, wouldn't be trying to, don't want to thwart anyone's creative dream of making that next fantasy odyssey or whatever it may be. But right off the bat, you might want to start picking topics and content and stories that you can tell in a fairly concise manner. Simple stories, especially when you're first starting out.
Here's a thought. If you're writing a screenplay and write the screenplay when you're first starting out, that if you had to, you could afford to produce yourself. And that limitation, if you have $50,000 you can spend, if you have $1,000 you can spend, if you have $50 you can spend. Once you've put that parameter, if it came down to it, I would finance this project myself, then write the script with that number in mind. And then you'll have a script that if nobody else in supposed Hollywood or Rhode Island or Florida or anywhere in the world, if no one wants to help you make your movie, you've written a script that, in theory at least, you could make yourself if you went into the game writing in that manner.
Yeah, and I think to play to that point, this kind of segues into sort of like strategy too. And we're going to get into outlining, which obviously like the goal is to finish your script. So today is really the biggest focus is going to be on outlining. But before we even get there, you know, it starts with the concept, with the idea. What am I writing my movie about? What is this about? Who are the characters? Who are these people? What story am I telling? Well, it's like Mike said, you want to see what you have available to you, right down to, and I've done this myself. Like I've written entire screenplays based on a location that I know that I can get. You know, like if
Sure.
you know that, let's say you've got a friend or a family member who has a really cool warehouse that has classic like Reservoir Dogs vibes to it, and oh wow, I know that I can shoot here. It's got a garage, it's got this cool back room, it's got a parking lot in the background, and you know, it's got grounds that are sprawling where I could shoot other scenes nearby but still be on the same location. It's a dream location. Well, if you have a dream location like that at your disposal, I mean, right there, I know it sounds crazy, but like you almost might want to start figuring out. It seems like reverse engineering,
Right.
retrofitting, but it's not crazy if you really want to make this thing to start thinking about, well, what can I write around what I actually have my hands around? Like, oh yeah, I got that warehouse that my friend said I could use anytime. It's empty. We can literally have the keys, walk in, and turn the lights on. That's something that you know, if it's a really cool location, it's almost worth just like scratching your head a little bit and saying like, well, what could I just build around this location?
Sure. What's
And
at
then
my
for
fingertips?
yeah, what do I have? So locations are big for that.
And
In
just
addition to, go ahead, Mike.
well, just to back you up on that, I believe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but one of your earlier films, Army of the Damned, I think, was filmed mostly in a suburban home that you had access to, in which you had some pretty big name people in there. I believe the gentleman from Candyman was in that film, and you basically use the suburban home as a shooting area, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right on that?
It's true, Mike, and I appreciate you not using names to protect the innocent.
Sure.
That suburban home was actually my parents' house.
Well, I didn't want
You know,
to. I didn't want to bring Tom and Marie did into this mess, but yes, then shout out to your
no,
folks; they're great people.
yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, that was something where, you know, I'm in my 20s, I'm just getting my career started out,
Yeah,
and it was kind of like, oh man, what, you know, I need like you know, my parents live in this, well, they used to live in this kind of creepy older house that practically looks like a haunted house, and I knew that I didn't know, but I figured with some good convincing, if I did all my chores and got a good report card, they would let me
sure.
use this house, and sure enough, they were gracious enough to let us take it over, and I knew that I'd have a home base, and it's the same thing when I wrote self-storage, which I'm sure we'll
Right.
do a whole episode on self-storage this summer because, believe it or not, we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of self-storage. That'll be happening this
Congratulations.
summer. Thank you.
Yes.
10 years since I made
That
my
was the
first
first film
movie.
you directed. Yeah.
Yeah, now self-storage, which starred Eric Roberts and Michael Berryman and Jonathan Silverman. That movie was entirely based around a self-storage facility, and I knew that going into things. You know, that was, again, a perfect case in point of what I'm talking about here on the show. I knew that, okay, there's a lot of producers that are looking for makeable horror content right now, but the big thing was one location and right around 10 actors. You don't have any more than about 10 cast members, and there's a reason for that. We'll get into that later. But I knew right away, okay, one location, 10 actors. Oh, self-storage facility. Because what that does is I knew that like within each unit of the self-storage facility, although we're in one location, we also have the opportunity to have sub-locations within the locations so
Right.
that I could kind of get like more bang from my buck. And the movie wouldn't feel so congested and just in one spot. So basically, there's two really great examples, and I bet you if I really thought about it, I could probably find an example in almost every script that I've written. You know, as I go through in my head, for the most part, I'd say, man, at least 75% of them, I've kind of had an idea of where I was going to try to shoot the movie before I even started writing the script. And it was a big help. It allowed me to do things like, you know, I'm not one of these like, you know, I don't know. I'm not the kind of writer who needs to like be on set and soak up the grounds and you know feel what it feels like to be there. I can do all that in my head. I'm fortunate. I
Sure.
don't actually need to go live it out. I don't actually need to go spend a weekend at a creepy mansion to know what it's like to be at a creepy mansion. That said, if you are one of those types of writers, you might find it helpful to actually go to the location that you're going to be filming at. If anything, forget about for the the romantic writer bullshit. If anything, for the simple sense that you might be like, "Oh wow, this place has a really cool staircase that we could get this kind of jib shot going up the stairs, and then later when we have
Right.
that shootout, that could happen on this hallway here." And you start to like have a what I call like a sort of like a geographic breakdown
Hmm.
of your location in your head. That way you're not guessing, because I'm sure this has happened to you before as a writer. It's happened to me many times, and it can be challenging because you have to adjust on the fly. But you go and you write one scene, and then, production tells you that they have a location locked for it, and you're like, "Okay, cool. Well, we're gonna shoot the scene in the hot tub." And they're like, "Oh yeah, this hotel doesn't have a hot tub," or whatever it may be.
Right.
That's just like one example. But
The
like,
hot tub's out of order. Forgot to tell you. Why do you need the hot tub?
yeah,
Well,
you're
we
like,
told
"Oh,
you we
we
needed the
thought
hot
we
tub.
yeah, we're like,
Yeah.
oh, we thought this place would have a second floor and it doesn't. Or, oh, we
Right.
thought this hotel would have an elevator and it's actually all just on one floor." So like a lot of times you'll have these like kind of key moments cooked up in your imagination that rely on a specific piece, set piece, and it's not there. So again, these are all just more points to writing what's available to you, write what you know, write about topics that you're very passionate about. There's nothing wrong with doing research and learning something new for the sake of writing a script. But when it's your first script and you're trying to make that first draft, I really do recommend like writing about something you really give a shit about, something that you really care about, and that it almost kind of, not to sound like silly, cheesy, whatever, but like the characters are just kind of singing to you.
Sure.
Maybe they are you. Maybe there's
Right.
that one character that is you in your mind or whatever. But writing things and elements that will never do you wrong. The right topic. Want to avoid the difficult topics. You want to avoid things that are big. Um, because remember too, like writing a big fancy script with lots of locations and lots of explosions and lots of action, it's cool. Yeah, it could be a great read. Someone might be like, wow, that guy can, or girl or whoever, that person can really write. But it might actually detract a producer who's like, hey, look, I love your script, but the truth is, I'm looking for like a $500,000 horror movie. This is
Right.
like a $7 million science fiction film, or, yeah, we're looking for like a crime drama that's gonna fall right in that $1 million range. This is like a $5 to $10 million action movie.
I can give you an
So
example like
again,
that. I can give
sure.
you an example of that from a person who actually hired me to be a script consultant about 3 or 4 years ago. A nice guy from Boston, and
Mike, real quick,
basically,
tell us, not to interrupt, but tell everyone in like a sentence, what is a script consultant, just in case they don't know.
script consultant is usually a paid position. The price can vary greatly, but it's someone who basically reads your entire screenplay and gives you feedback. And that could be in the form of going through the whole script, writing notes on all the pages. It could be a Zoom call, a Skype call, an in person conversation. A script consultant could be someone in the industry who is a professional screenwriter or someone who's a film director or a producer. And it's basically you're paying for the service of a opinion that you respect.
Could I say,
And
Mike, that it's
sure,
basically a hired gun? It's a hired gun that comes
sure,
in. And they know right off the bat, listen, you guys have probably heard this term before. They're ghost writers, meaning they could come up with the most amazing idea on the planet, and it's not going to say also written by Mikey Messier. Like he's going to get paid for that consulting job, and that's the payment.
well, I'm not
Um,
talking about a. Maybe we have our terms. Maybe I'm off or something. But I was literally a consultant. I didn't write this guy's script at all. I just gave
right,
him
but
thoughts on it.
what I'm saying though, Mike, is in your process of giving
Yeah,
those thoughts,
right.
if you gave some great idea that went and revolutionized his script and he changed
Sure.
it, it ain't
Yep.
gonna say written by Mikey Messier.
Correct. Yeah, you're
So
getting
that's
the
kind of
right.
you're basically like a coach. You're the corner
Yeah,
man. You don't get credit for the knockout, but
right.
it was very important that you were there to get the knockout. But
Yeah.
continue. So everybody, now that we know what a script consultant is, Mikey's on as a script consultant.
Yeah, this gentleman had it was his first screenplay that he ever wrote. Real nice guy, probably 45 years old. Wrote this script, and it basically felt like a late 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger action film, which basically I'm talking about a high budget project that called for a very strong central male character. And I'm looking at his script, and it was written a little bit goofy, I guess. There were some goofy moments, but at the core, what stood out was the main character was kind of a cool badass. Like, hey, you've created a guy that, and what I said to this gentleman, and he's never going to make this movie, so I'm not really screwing him over here, but he basically said, I said to him, I feel like your character needs to be in a better script or a different script, because there was some elements of this story, basically bar fighting, that were strong. Like his bar fight scenes were very strong with this character being a tough bar fighter. I said, why don't you get rid of all this Arnold Schwarzenegger commando stuff and make this a bar fighting movie where the guy is a drunk and he goes to bars and he fights, and you have some type of character redemption about his daughter or something like that.
Right.
So it's
So
kind of to your point.
Yeah, so it's basically like you got to be careful about how you dress up the movie. What kind of coat are you putting on this movie to walk around the streets in?
He had too much stuff going on, and that's kind of to your point of don't write the next Star Wars if you're an unknown writer, first time writer, and if you're shooting for the stars, why don't you write 3 or 4 or 5 other scripts that are low budget first, and with the goal of getting to that level where people want you to make a big time movie. But you got to walk before you run, and I think a lot of people who want to make a big time movie want to skip the 10 or 20 years of working your way through the business.
Right on. A couple quick shout outs. Shout out to Mike Braga just joined us. What's up, man? First time checking out the show. And Sully's Cafe has a quick question about he says the consult provides
Consultant.
concept. The consultant provides concepts. The writer irons it out. Well, not quite. Usually, that's a situation where, let's say I'm a writer, I have a script, and I have some sticking points, or maybe I'm at the finish line and I just want to get a second opinion. That person would hire a consultant to basically read the script and say, hey, I love this, and this. I don't know about that, and that. And basically, they're your they're your coach. They're gonna read the script and, hopefully in a polite way, not take too big of a shit on your beloved material, and basically give you the straight facts on, hey, this is a constructive way for you to fix your script. So it's basically just they're your coach, and again, back to the whole they're getting paid to do a job, and they're not the nice thing about hiring a consultant is everybody's worried about credit. Nobody wants to think that like, I wrote this whole script and then this guy just came in and gave me one little thing of help and now I have to give him the credit. Well, a consultant, you usually have an agreement in place where you sign it and basically says, hey, I'm paying you for these intellectual properties. That's what your consulting fee is. So if you give me some gem of an idea and I use it 2 years from now when we go make the movie, you can't sue me and say, hey, I deserve the credit. I wrote that.
Right.
So basically, it's a way for you to kind of both parties to be aware of what they're getting into, and nobody gets hurt that way. All right, so we've talked a lot about things that you shouldn't do. Let's start talking about some things that you should do
Okay.
to get this screenplay to the finish line. So I'm a big fan of outlining. It's always worked for me, and I have a system that's been very effective for me over the years. And when I've been lost on the road of writing and not sure if I should take a left or a right, I'll be able to look at this outline as kind of like my old school, I'm going to date myself here, but the MapQuest directions that I've printed out and they're gently nestled on my passenger seat like it's 2001.
Right.
So basically, I like to think of a script in the classic 3-act structure. I ain't reinventing the wheel. We're talking act 1, the beginning, act 2, the middle, act 3, the end, right? We've all
Yes.
heard this before. Now, really, a screenplay, a movie, a story, all it is is it's a progression of events. It's a series of events that take place to tell a story. They are things that happen. You're going to hear me use the word things a lot. And sometimes there's not a better word, and it's
Right.
okay just to say things.
Things or events might be a different word, but things
Yeah,
are good.
events. I like to say events, but for the sake of keeping it nice and simple, I want you to look at Act 1. Take your story idea, right? Now, a lot of times you can do this with note cards, okay? Note cards are great for this. So you break out your index cards, right? And you write down events, things. And they can be very simple things. They can be like, my main character wakes up in the morning and goes to work. And then, of course, the money gets stolen, and he finds the money, or he comes in contact with the bad guys.
He gets into a
Events.
car accident en route to work, and then something else. Right.
Exactly. So you write all of your events, all of your things that you want to have happen in this movie, and you limit it to 30 things. 30, 30. All right. Then you basically find 10 events that take place in the first act in the beginning, 10 events that take place in the middle, Act 2, and 10 events that take place in Act 3. And then you take your note cards, you sort them out, and you go, oh, okay, well, shit. You wakes up in the morning. That makes sense to go in Act 1. Put that there. The fight scene, that's kind of action packed. That's kind of culminating stuff. Let's put that over in Act 3. And you just start sorting these note cards out so that you
Right.
have 10. And then eventually, after doing all this sorting and all of this kind of, close consideration to where these events should take place in your timeline, you'll eventually have 10 things that happen in Act 1, 10 things that happen in Act 2, 10 things that happen in Act 3. And here's the trick. Ready? And again, this is not an exact science. It's not going to always work out exactly like this, but this is a great strategy just to get you there, just to get pages on the paper, just to get words on the pages. All right, so you've got your 10 things that happen in each act, beginning, middle, and end. Now I want you to try like hell to write 3 pages in screenplay format to describe, to play out, whatever phrasing you want to use, to play out that index card. So if your index card is Mikey wakes up and gets ready for work, well, guess what? That's going to be 3 pages right there. So I want you to sit down and I want you to crank out 3 pages in script form of Mike getting up, brushing his teeth, he picks out his clothes, he looks in the mirror, gets into the elevator, goes down, and he's outside among the world going to work. 3 pages.
Right.
Now, if you do that for every one of your elements, your events, whatever you want to call them, things, you're going to have 30 pages per act at a grand total of 90 pages. So when you look at it like that, for the people that have told me in the past, like, shit, like, how do you write 90 pages?
Right.
Like, that's so fucking daunting, like writing all those pages. Well, guess what? If you look at it in this kind of sense, where you're just kind of breaking it down and you're just going to kind of go section by section and event by event, suddenly it doesn't become as scary, all those pages, because now you know exactly what you're going to do. And then when you find yourself kind of lost, it's easier for you to be like, wait a minute, wait, where am I? And then you refer to
Right.
your outline and you realize like where you're going to be heading to.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Tommy. And I think a lot of people who are either writers or they want to be a writer, they get intimidated, just like you said, because they see this 90-page screenplay or a novel or whatever it might be as this overwhelming mountain of a thing. Well, if you make 1 or 2 steps a day, say you were to write, one of these events a day, in 3 months, you'd have your first draft of a screenplay, a feature film screenplay. So, that's very empowering. I think what people need to do is just advising, chop down the process into bite-sized bits. You know what I mean? Don't feel like you've got to do a crazy weekend or, whatever other
Yes.
time expectation.
Yeah, I think that's what it's all about, Mike. I mean, writing a script can appear to be so overwhelming and challenging at first, and just like climbing up a flight of 10,000 stairs. And you're just
Right.
like, you're at the bottom and you're looking up at all these stairs, and it's like, God damn, how am I going to get up there? It's like, well, you don't really have to climb the 10,000 stairs at once. You really just have to climb one step at a time. So it's like, if you can climb one stair, you can climb 10,000 of them. It's just a matter of when you decide to get up there, and how you go about it. And like you said, Mike, this kind of segues into something that I've been doing a lot lately that's been working so well. It's almost like I wish I discovered this 10 years ago. But I've been doing what I call 30-minute writing sprints,
Okay.
where I will basically take my clock out and I'll set a 30-minute timer. I'll put it away out of sight. I don't even want to see it. It's very important. Do not look at the numbers. Do not ever look at the timer. Don't
Yeah.
look at it. Put it away. And then I try to just give the pages 30 minutes of my most intense focus humanly possible, where I'm like so into those pages. And usually what ends up happening is I'm averaging, every scene's different, but I'm averaging right around a scene per sprint. You know, like I'm able to almost write a scene. When I say a scene, probably somewhere in that couple, page or two range in that 30-minute span. And it feels like, it's just like this crazy sprint where you're just giving it your all.
Mm,
And you kind of know, it's like you tell yourself, like, all right, this is it. We're going to do it all right here in this 30 minutes. And then we're going to drop it for today and pick it up tomorrow. And, that's a great method. And this is probably for another podcast down the road. But recently I've had to do that. And this is a blessing. This is the kind of thing that when I was first starting out, I would have begged for these opportunities. But then, like anything else in life, as time goes on, you get jaded and you're like, ah, fuck, I got to write 3 scripts at once.
right.
Like I have a deadline for this script, a deadline for this script, and a deadline for this script that I don't exactly have to turn it into anyone, but it's a personal project that I want to
Sure.
finish for my own goddamn pride. So basically, how do I juggle all this? How do I put the time in? That's where your 30-minute sprints really pay off, because I could be like, all right, I'm gonna do 30 minutes to start my day on this movie, and then I'm gonna switch to this screenplay. Give me a hard 30 minutes. We'll take a little break. 30 minutes on that other one, and then you're able to like move multiple kind of balls down the field at once. But
Sure.
back to the outlining again. Remember, I am not a math guy, so you'll find that out as you get to know me. And I know what you're thinking. Well, how does that work? I mean, not every event is going to be 3 pages long exactly. And you're right.
No.
It's not gonna be 3 pages long exactly, but you use it as a measuring stick, as a bit of a guide,
A
because
guideline.
it's a guideline, so that like, okay, and you can start to even think about this stuff in your head. You can start to be like, well, this scene's a little heavy. This scene's probably gonna be like 4 pages.
Right.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll compensate with a 2-page scene on the next bit. Maybe your next event of your
Sure.
list of events, maybe that doesn't need to be 3 pages. Maybe that one could be two. Hell, maybe you have 2 events that are 1 page each, and then
Right.
one that's going to be 6 pages. It's all going to come out in the wash. But what we're trying to do is keep you like ingrained in a philosophy of like trying to carve out each element and almost think of each element. I don't want to blow your minds, because it's not that mind blowing, to be honest. But I've tried to do this, and it's a fun game to play. And I kind of discovered this by accident. And this is why I really like the 3 pages per event.
Yeah.
You challenge yourself to almost tell a mini story within each event, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you do it right, each little event, each little 3-page scene, if you will,
Right.
has a beginning, it's got some rising action, it's got a climax, and it kind of can come down a little bit.
As a micro story. So you've got
Micros,
basically, yeah, 30 events, 30 micro stories that equate to your 90-minute movie, about 90-minute, because typically a page a minute for screenplay. And once again, folks, just in case anyone gets hung up on numbers or exactness, you got to remember this is the arts world, this is the entertainment world. So there's always going to be some uh, leeway there Tommy, I've got a question for you though. If I was the listener, something that you said that I don't want to leave any hanging chads here. You said proper screenwriting format. Well, there's a program that I use, and I know that you use it, which affords any writer proper screenwriting format. There is a learning curve, like anything else. I took a screenwriting class at the University of Rhode Island to kind of learn some of the basics. I also read a lot of screenwriting books. I read a whole lot of screenwriting books when I was first getting started. But you don't have to necessarily do any of that if you have this really good program. Is that something you want to talk about? The proper
Yeah,
program?
we definitely should talk a little bit about that. And this by no means is a plug for the program. We don't get a dime for this. The truth is, it's really the industry standard. It's a program called Final Draft. I don't know what they're up to now. It might be like
About
Final
200
Draft
bucks.
11. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
but
12. 12. It's about
Final Draft 12 is what you
about
should be doing.
$200. Yeah.
But just punch in Google Final Draft and you'll find it. It's 200 bucks. It's the best 200 bucks ish that you're going to ever spend on your screenwriting career. And it's so intuitive to use. I am not a great computer person. I'm not really that tech savvy, but this thing is just like it almost writes for you. And what I mean by that is like while you're typing along, like when you hit enter, once you have two or three characters programmed in, it almost knows what character you want to speak next, and it'll start to suggest like, did you want Mike to speak, or do you want Tom to speak? Oh, and this is probably a Mike line, and it's just so easy to write with. And I will say this too: once you get up to a certain level and you start actually making your movie, it's just going to be expected that your scripts
Right.
are handed in final draft. It's kind of just again, it's just industry standard. So I don't often like if you watched episode one, I try to tell people like don't spend money on headshots, avoid that shit. I try to have people avoid all of the classic traps for actors, writers, and directors because I feel like there's almost this like whole subdivision of people trying to make money
Off the talent.
off of actors and people
Yeah.
trying to make money
Right.
off of the writers.
Yes.
Like, wouldn't you say, Mike, there's like almost this whole sub industry of like fucking hustlers, to be honest with you,
Well,
that are
yeah,
like
you're
just
you're
trying to
you're
make a buck.
right. Here's one that people, especially parents, will hear. Hey, your 12-year-old child is a natural actor. We just need really good headshots. Go to this headshot photographer and pay them $2,000, and then we can get your kid work. It's an old scam. And now, if you replace kid with adults, a lot of adults uh, fall into a lot of traps. But when I'm thinking about this final draft, and Tommy, there is other screenwriting programs out there that we could
I
name, but
wouldn't
I
mess with
won't.
them. No, I
Yeah,
wouldn't mess with them. I really wouldn't. I
no, but
highly
yeah, that's
recommend
right.
Final Draft and only Final Draft.
Well, that's to my point too, because what I was going to say is our friend Jeff O'Carrieri and I were talking about final draft, and I was getting very frustrated with a friend of mine who didn't want to spend the $200 on the final draft, and she was using a different free program that was inferior. And I kept telling her over and over again, you're not really going to get your scripts to the highest possible people without being in final draft. She didn't really want to hear it. I told Joe about it, and Joe was not a screenwriter, but he was a musician. And he said, Mike, this is Pro Tools. Final Draft is Pro Tools for musicians. I didn't know what that was. Well, Pro Tools, I guess, is the recording program that's industry standard for
Yeah,
musicians.
exactly.
So there are other programs than Pro Tools, but if you really want to play with the big boys and the big girls, you got to use Pro Tools if you're a musician, apparently, and you got to use Final Draft if you're wanting to be a screenwriter. And if you can't afford the $200, um, figure out a way to earn $200 and then buy it. I mean, that's just the easiest.
Yeah,
We're
it's a
trying to
it's a
save you some
great
time here.
let's put it this way. Again, this is the last point I'll make about the 200 bucks. If you were to ever log all the time that you'll eventually put into your final draft program, you probably end up literally paying like a fraction of a penny per hour uh when from start to finish. So it's well worth it when it comes to grabbing a program that you can get your screenplay looking like a real pro script. Speaking of looking like a real pro script, I'm not usually one to harp on this stuff, but it really is a thing. keep it clean. You know, when you're writing your script, before you hand it in to anybody, whether it's a buddy, a friend that's just going to read it or whatever, I highly recommend you read that shit to yourself out loud. Not in your head, but like read it out loud, put it into the air and speak it out. And I'll tell you why. Because you'd be amazed at how many things you miss in terms of typos and in grammar. Because here's the thing, it's not always the misspellings. Fuck all
Right.
that, right? It's the when you typed out there, but you meant the. It's like
Right.
the little things like that that the program's not going to tell you. Because as
Yeah.
far as they're concerned, yeah, you spelled there right. It's fine to me. No, you got to read that shit out loud, not even to yourself, because we all get lazy, man. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to talk about, generalize humankind, mankind, but like we're in such a now world where like these fucking things right here. Look at I've been on this podcast for 45 minutes. I've got 5 missed calls and a bunch of text messages and emails and shit. There are so many distractions, so it doesn't shock me that like, oh, you read your script to yourself and you missed some errors. Yeah, of course
Right.
you did. Read that shit out loud. You have no idea how much it's going to help, not only for like the action lines, but also for the dialogue. You know, a lot of times we're so in our heads when we're writing this dialogue, and I've read the most unrealistic dialogue. Remember, the first thing that I did coming up in the industry, and we'll probably have like an origins episode someday, but my first job in the in the industry was reading screenplays for a director. They would
Right.
come in, he would get like 4 or 5 a week, like just sent to him, and I was the first line of defense, and I must have read 1,000 screenplays in a few year stretch. And what I did was I learned what I liked and I learned what I didn't like and I learned different formats that were cool. And I'll be honest with you, I have never really read a screenwriting book from cover to cover. I've owned screenwriting books and I've referenced them, but my screenwriting book was reading 1,000 other
Sure.
screenplays that were good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
That's how I learned. But one thing that they all had in common at that level, when you're actually submitting a script to a director to potentially get made, they were all fucking spotless. They were all you could eat off of the pages.
No
Meaning,
typos, no apostrophes used incorrectly, no theirs with an apostrophe instead of THEIR or whatever. Just and if someone had ever written a Microsoft Word screenplay, you probably would have caught that right away because it would look horrible with bad margins and indentations. So those final draft, screenplays obviously looked a lot better than anything else.
yeah, and I'm not like this, and certainly as an intern, I had no swagger or credibility to be like this. But I've heard horror stories, and I'm not an LA guy, I'm an East Coast guy. But I've heard horror stories that certain LA types at big agencies, if they're handed a script and there's a typo or it's not the right format or there's something wrong, they will literally throw it in the fucking trash.
Right.
They will not read the script. They will take your hard-earned dream, all the time and all the crafting that you did. They will say, "This dumb bastard can't even spell donkey right," and they'll
Yeah.
throw it in the fucking garbage because to them, like when I first came up, I thought that was really extreme and foolish and dumb. But as I get a little older and I get a little more experience, I say to myself, I almost get it. It's almost like, listen, if you're missing a detail like this and you're willing to hand this in to me and say, yes, this is ready for prime time, and you miss that detail, why should I even read the rest of it? Like, where's where's the pride in what you're
Right.
handing in? Where's the craftsmanship? Where's the effort? So if it's not there, like I get it, that's why like remember, it takes a long time to read a script, right? It takes about an hour, hour and a half if you're good.
Yeah.
So like to that person, they're like, these people are gonna waste my time with this
Well,
typo bullshit,
it's if
and they
if they
throw it
see
out.
if they see typos or that they see a dedication on the title page, which is a no-no for the most part. If they see any of that stuff, to throw that script in the trash means that they get to put that much more time into the scripts that didn't make those mistakes, and it's a filtering system. It's a protecting system. I just saw a movie, Tommy. It was I couldn't believe it. I think the word starring has two R's in it, right? STARRING. this movie started off with staring, and then he started, and I'm like, this was
Wow.
a finished film, a
This
finished
is like a
documentary.
movie you saw in the wow.
It was a documentary about a pro wrestler, and I stuck with it. I almost stopped watching it out of disgust, but I stuck with it. It turned out
It's
to
a
be a good one.
it's a shame, and I'm insulted as a wrestling fan for them to think that the majority of wrestling fans are just illiterate and they won't
Right.
notice the typo. Um,
Yeah.
well, in any case, uh, let's talk about a couple of other things to avoid.
Sure.
Again, and I know that this is really about like finishing your first script and how you can finish it. But
Right.
remember, a lot of the things that we're telling you to avoid will help you finish it because you won't have to write 7 or 8 iterations of your script. By doing some of these things, you can streamline it so that who knows, maybe that first draft that you end up finishing is a little bit more further down the road and a little bit more complete than a lot of other first drafts might be. So like some things to avoid, too many pages.
Yeah.
I've seen writers that, and I'm probably guilty of this. They're almost proud of like this is 128 pages or it's 141 pages this draft or
Mhm.
what. It's like, yeah, guess what? That's a major fucking deterrent to anybody who's actually going to try to make the movie because a lot of producers they ain't gonna even read it. They're gonna say, "Oh my god, it's 140 something pages." Do you know how many days it would take to shoot that? Do you know how much money it would cost to produce something like that? Like right away, you're gonna like scare them with that
Yeah.
page count. I don't care if you could have some really cool concept where you're like, no, you don't understand. The pages are gonna fly because we're just gonna shoot it 2 people in a vacuum and it's just be all green screen. Doesn't matter. They're gonna see 130 pages and they're gonna freak out. Like you mentioned it before, touch upon it again and give us a little bit more of a deeper definition about 1 page equals 1 minute.
Yeah, there's a general rule of thumb, and it's a general rule of thumb that if you have one page of a screenplay written, that translates to about 1 minute of actual finished film time. Now, obviously, some scenes, if you have a car chase scene, it might be longer. If you have a quick dialogue thing that takes up, but the general average, if a producer or whoever, an actor, sees that you've got a 100-page screenplay, that's 100 minutes, an hour and a half plus 10 minutes. If you've got a 90-page screenplay, that's an hour and a half. If you've got a 120-page screenplay, that's 2 hours, and so on. It's a general rule of thumb that the industry uses. That's all.
Yeah, so generally speaking, on I would say like first time filmmakers that are trying to get their first movie made, generally you don't want to go above the 100-page mark. And even that is a little stretch. I would recommend no more than 90 pages. If you can tell a story with a beginning, middle, and an end, and you've got, remember that magic number, right around 10 characters, and it's 90 pages, you have a very attractive script that a producer is going to look at and say, oh shit, 90 pages. We could make that in 10, 15 days. Like that's makeable. That's a doable kind of a thing. So remember the magic number and avoid those hefty page counts because they're only going to hurt you.
Tommy, let me
Um,
give a quick story about the hefty pages. A guy in our backyard of Rhode Island about 10 years ago, nice guy, but he wrote a 300-page script. And he actually, and I said to him, I don't know if I was the only one, I said, hey, why don't you make this 2 or 3 movies? And he said, no, 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 no. He wanted to make this epic 300-page, it's like 300 minutes, like 5 hour. And he wasn't going to break it into 2 parts. He was insistent. Well, they went out, they got all the local non-union actors they could get, spent a lot of people's summer to make this movie. And unfortunately, the movie was filmed, but another choke point, bad audio, and then the movie never got finished in the editing. So why couldn't he have made, if he had broken that up into 3 shorter movies, 2 or 3, at least make the first one, then realize you've got bad audio and go back and fix it and so forth. But I just hate to see people waste time. That's one of my pet peeves with
yeah,
all this stuff. And writing a 300-page script, it actually convincing people to be in this thing and to help you make it and then not finishing, to me
well, I
that
will
was a
say
real
this.
waste of humanity.
A credit to that fella for being one of the most persuasive individuals I can imagine. Because if anyone ever came up to me and said, hey, I have this 300-page script, I want to make it, I would literally think they are insane.
Right.
And I'd be like, hey, it was nice doing business with you. Let's have a coffee sometime. And I probably would never call that person again because I would understand that they're unrealistic and they don't really quite have a grasp on reality. So unfortunately, this show is designed to try to steer people away from that stuff so that you don't end up, like Mike said, wasting an entire summer on something that frankly just can't be done. Let's talk about some other things. Another common mistake that I think a lot of writers make, and I probably make this on every script that I write, and I always have to kind of remind myself, is too many characters. Too many characters, which inevitably get lost in the sauce. You know your story really well. You know every character. You know why they're there. You know that what their function is to tell the story. But somebody who's just reading this thing off the street, so to speak, they don't really have that connective tissue with your script and your heart. So they're just going to read it for what it is, and you're going to find yourself doing this a lot, and we're all guilty of this. We see a character's name on the page. We're 20, 30 pages in, and we see like a name, and we're like, oh wait, who's Ricky? And you have to flip back a couple pages and try to find, like, wait, where was Ricky? Did I miss Ricky? Oh,
Right.
okay. Ricky is the cousin of so and so. And if you do that more than once in a movie, like, guess what? You're kind of taking the audience out of it. You don't want to have people have to go back. That's a big no-no. You should never have people be like, shit, wait, why does this happen? That means that you probably did something wrong or you weren't clear about something. So one of the common, you'll hear this a million times, and I don't know if it's like when you're an executive, they give you like a certain list of like notes to say, common notes to say. But like one of the most common notes that I've kind of been hit with in a lot of my scripts that I've submitted have been too many characters, and then it'll be followed up by, can we combine some?
Right.
And I know what you're thinking, combine some. What? No, like no, I Jimmy is tall and Billy is fat. They can't be, we can't, or whatever, like this is the
Right.
funny character, this is the lovable one, this is the one we Yeah, but you know what? That's all in your head.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that stuff but you. So what I started to do was say, well, instead of having three characters that each have a couple funny lines, maybe you just have one character that has all the funny lines,
Sure. He's the
you
comic
know,
relief. He's the
and now
jester.
exactly. So it's funny. There's that old phrase, addition by subtraction.
But less
And
is
I
more.
gotta
Yeah.
say, yeah, less is more. And I gotta say, like, I've dug my heels on the whole combined characters thing, yet every time I've really tried to just break down, do the work and combine the characters, I'm almost always like, shit, that's way better than having all these random fucks that nobody gives a shit about in your script. So strength in numbers is not always a thing in the screenwriting world. Sometimes you get more strength when you have just better characters.
A quick example to the extreme, really, and I'll to protect the guilty. I know, and I think you know of someone who had a screenplay that they insisted it was like an autobiographical thing, and they wanted the six sisters to be represented properly. And you could have easily made those six sisters into one or two sisters or three at the most. But this person wanted to use the real names of the real sisters in the story, and insisted that there be six sisters represented, and that's about five sisters too many. And so that film has never been made. And part of it is the originator of that idea has to come to the conclusion that a film is a different entity than the reality of what actually happened. And if you're not mature enough to take on that, you're going to have a hard time getting anywhere in the industry.
That's a great point, Mike. I'm actually working on a screenplay called Knockout Blonde, and it's a true story. And I'm telling the true story, very inspirational story of Callie Maloney, who was the manager of the former undisputed heavyweight champ of the world, Lennox Lewis. And that's a true story. We're talking about a person who roams the earth, really exists, has a family, has children, real people, real characters. However, all that said, And working with Kelly has been a pleasure. I've been able to actually become really friends with her over the last couple years, and we're able to kind of have this relationship where she kind of has really understood the film process. And I was nervous at first because people get so connected to their real life story, and myself and my producing team basically had to be like, hey, listen, I know that you had two brothers, but for the sake of the story and the efficiency of telling the story, it might make more sense if we just have one brother. And you know what? To Kelly's credit, she totally understood and got that, like, okay, well, there was my real life, and then there's
Right.
the I don't want to say fictional, but then there's the film retelling of my real life. Because
Yes.
guess what? We have the task of taking Kelly's life, which spans several decades, and we have to curtail it all into a 90 to 120-minute little chunk of time.
Right.
Guess what? Characters will be combined, elements will be changed, dates will be moved around. That's kind of what we have to do, but we're still going to try to stay as true to the story as we can, and that's kind of your job as the screenwriter. But to play to Mike's point, it does become even more tricky if you're telling a real story. But you inevitably will have to trim things and make
Yeah.
things flow.
You're making a movie. You're not making a documentary, going back with the time machine and filming things as they happen. A great example is Bleed for This, the Vinny Pazienza boxing movie. Vinny's comeback fight was not against Roberto Duran. That was about 10 or 15 fights later. Vinny's comeback fight was against some other guy that wasn't as good as Roberto Duran. What is more creatively climactic? It's you get into a car accident, you
Yeah,
come
of
back and you
course.
fight Roberto Duran. You do what you have
Yeah,
to do in order to make a good movie. And sometimes people who are really not experienced with this stuff are beholden to the truth as if there's some invisible dictator film board that's going to,
to a
evaluate
fault
them.
too. And
Yeah,
and just to cut in, like, to a fault, sometimes
right.
sticking to the facts isn't always the best way to tell the story. Like Mike said, yes, there might have been, if, and I'm pulling these numbers out of thin air, but like if 1 million people watched Bleed for This, the Vinny Paz story, the day it came out, maybe a couple hundred of them literally would have known that, wait a minute, he didn't fight that guy right after the broken
Yeah, I
neck.
was
It
going to
was a
say
few,
10.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, maybe, and I'm being like really, yeah, like there's
yeah.
literally maybe a couple dozen people that would actually know that.
Right, right.
So why are we going to placate our entire film, all this time and energy we're putting into it, to make the fucking 12 boxing fans that actually know happy? I don't think so. That's not how
Right.
we do
To
it.
quote Jim Ross, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
That's right. And one more thing on the point of keeping it the characters and combining them. That's also, again, just like page count can be a deterrent to potential producers. Believe it or not, the larger your cast is, the more money it's going to cost. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's more people on set. It's a bigger SAG deposit when you eventually go and pay the bills, so to speak. It's more money that's going out to more actors and more cast. So that's another thing where, like, a big page count can be scary to a producer. If they see like 30, 40 characters, that can be scary too. I'm actually going through that right now as I write Knockout Blonde. In fact, when I get off of this podcast, we're going to be wrapping up very shortly. When I get off, I have a call with one of my producing partners to go over that budget. And I have a feeling they're probably going to tell me, like, hey, you've got five too many characters. You need to
Right.
find a way to get rid of some. So that's unfortunately just like, like the football coach who has to make those last cuts before the final preseason game and going into the regular season. I'm going to have to put some pink slips in some lockers at some point and be like, hey, love you, but going to combine you with this character. You're out of here.
Yeah.
Or just cut you all together. And that's just unfortunately the nature of the beast.
Save you for the sequel. We did
Yeah,
have
we'll
some.
save. Yeah, let's
Did it,
go ahead, Mike. Do we have some questions? You want
yeah,
to take
my
that
friend
over?
Kim Kaling has a question. I think you, as the host, have to push the button on the right side, Tommy, to get the questions on screen.
Ah, yes, that's right.
That's
That's
so
right.
I can see them, but I can't post them. So my friend Kim here, who helped me with my seduction of distance monologue last summer, I appreciate it. Our buddy Michael Braga says hi. He's watching live. I hope he's still with us. And thanks, Michael, for tuning in. Sully's Cafe. I'd like to know where that is. I might have to go visit next time I'm around. The consultant provides concepts. The writers irons it out. We talked about that earlier. Kim, who's interested in screenwriting and producing herself, is taking notes. This is where a question I was getting to. Would a 60-minute screenplay be considered a short? She typoed with the break. So it's would a 60-minute screenplay. And Tommy, my initial feeling, I'll let you expand on it, is a 60-minute narrative film is a tough time because it's too long to be a short and it's too short to be a feature. If it was a documentary, oddly enough, a documentary at 60 minutes might be okay because it could play on PBS possibly. But a 60-minute narrative is a tough one. Go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, Mike, I think that technically, as far as the Academy of Motion Picture Science is concerned, I believe it's like anything over 40 or 45 minutes is technically a feature. Big fat, however, nobody is making features that are 45 minutes to an hour. They don't exist. So I would recommend either taking that concept and doing I got three options for you, Kim. I would take your 60-minute screenplay and I would either beef it up by adding 20, 25 pages and trying to get it up to that healthy hour and 25, hour and 30-minute feature length, or I'd go the opposite with it and I would try to like trim 15, 20 pages and potentially position it as a pilot, like for television. Again, I don't know what your concept
Or
is,
break it in
but
half and you have episode 1 and episode 2 of a TV series
of
if the idea is strong enough for a series.
yeah, or again, like if you're just talking like straight up short films, which I have to be candid, I don't have a ton of experience with short films. I haven't done a ton of them myself, but I'd like to think that usually those are more in that like 10-minute, 15-minute ballpark. And then anything over that, I've told people this before that come to me and they have like this 40-page screenplay and they're like, "Hey, I'm thinking about making this into like a really like fat short film, like an extended short." And I always tell them, I say, "Hey man, you're better off just like writing more and making a feature at that point." Because here's the truth, and I could be wrong, and I might get some people to drop down a comment and say, "No, you're wrong. In 2018, this short went on to make millions of dollars, whatever." Short films don't make money. They don't. They're not really in the business to make money. Short films are proof of concept. They're designed to get a notion out that might become something bigger down the road. But if you're doing this as a business and you're trying to, again, this podcast is for people that are trying to do this for a living, and like if you're really trying to do it for a living, if you're going to put all this time into writing a screenplay, you should try to write a feature because that gives you the most chance to actually make some money, off of it.
Right.
So that would be my recommendation. And yeah, it's one of those things where this stuff's not easy, but I will say this: there's nothing better than having a full story in front of you from start to finish, 85, 95, 100 pages, and just willing it to existence and getting that first draft done. From there is going to sound funny, whatever, it is what it is. But like only then do you really begin to truly start writing. You know what I mean? Like once you have the draft in front of you and you can read it out loud, like we said, and you can understand what the story truly is and who the characters are, then you get to really do the fun part, which is like craft it and tweak it and just get it to be tight and spit shine it. And later on, as this podcast develops down the road, we're going to do, writing part 2 and writing part 3. And we're just going to keep going with tactics on how to polish up your screenplay once you get it done. Today was really all about following that outline. Remember, roughly 30 events that take place in your film, 3 pages per event. Write it all out. You're going to have 90 pages right around. Get to the finish line, because then you have something that you can share with people. You can have other artists read. You can have other, like we talked about, script writing consultants. Well, you can have a consultant check it out and give you
Which
some
we're
ideas.
both available. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but at least I'm available as a script consultant. I know you've done that in the past, Tommy, yourself.
Yeah, man. I mean, a lot of listen, writers and creative people, we got to do whatever we can do to survive. It ain't easy. We don't get to go to the pay window every week,
Right.
as they say. We don't have that guaranteed 40 hours a week that we work. We have to kind of make it happen for ourselves. So with that, yeah, you're damn right. In between screenwriting jobs, I've been able to try and make a couple extra bucks as a consultant here and there, and that's what we do. We have a question here from Sully's Cafe. Mike, you want to take that one?
Well, he said only Vinny Paz would know, and he would tell me when I run into him in Providence. Tell Vinny I said hi. Vinny's a friend of mine. He's always been good to me. I think what Sully's Cafe is referencing is when we were talking about Bleed for This.
Yeah, yeah, that
But I
Duran
mean,
wasn't the next guy.
if you, but Sully, just to be straight with you, and I think you're just joking around, but anybody with access to boxingrec.com can look up the records and see that Duran was
Yeah.
not the first opponent, so it's no big deal. It's part of the filmmaking. You know, when I went to see Bleed for This in the movie theater, Tommy, Vinny Paz himself came into the theater to watch it. And I said, hey, Vinny, how many times have you watched this movie? You know, the movie about his life. And he said, 5 times, Mikey Mess. And I said, well, Vinny, when you watch it the 6th time, you fight Sugar Ray Leonard at the end.
That's funny. The ending actually changes.
The ending changes because you watch the movie so much, the Duran character leaves and Sugar Ray comes in for the finale instead.
He fights Ivan Drago at the end of
it. Right? Yeah. But
yeah,
good movie though. I like the movie. Miles Teller did a great job. You were in that movie too.
Yeah. Miles Teller was very talented. I did get a chance to act in that movie, and yeah, it was a blast, man. It was a really fun. One of my favorite parts about Bleed for This is the time era. I love that, like late 80s, you know, into the early 90s era. I mean, that's kind of the era that I grew up in. I was a very little kid in the 80s, and then of course the 90s is kind of like where I came of age. So it's cool to kind of see that on screen. And producer Chad Verdi and that whole team did an amazing job with Bleed for This, and director Ben Younger, and you can check that one out. So yeah, guys, you know, we appreciate the time that you spent with us today. We're going to kind of wind things down. Remember, Mike, you want to plug your book there? You just finished.
Sure. Yeah, speaking of boxing stories, and also, it's also a Providence story for our New England friends. A lot of this movie takes place in North Providence, Rhode Island, and the Providence College campus. There's, I think, some references to Uncle Tony's Pizza, the New York System Wiener Place. And I even have a table of contents. Yeah, so there's that fighter play basketball for the more gothic of our fans or horror fans. Gothic horror, A Distance from Avalon, When the Dying of the Dead. Special shout out to my friend and the cover artist, Nazar Germanov. He's actually been in the Ukraine, believe it or not, this whole time. And he's doing about as well as could be expected. But I'm very concerned for my buddy over there. And he's a great artist. And beyond that, Tommy, maybe next week I'll get into it. But for the first time, I put a casting call out for a very short film that I will be the writer-director of. Very short film, Many Keys, the Heartbreak Monologue. I put that into Actors Access, and I didn't realize it's a little bit complicated. So they sent me back all these things that I got to do. But hopefully next week that'll be up. And if any actresses, adult actresses.
I was just going to say, is there anyone, perhaps some listeners of the End Action Show, if you're looking to get into Mike's movie, maybe you could send an audition tape his way. I'm sure that you could write to Mike at mikemessier.com and maybe get in his movie.
Well, I would say that they should look for the Actors Access thing. Hopefully that'll be up by next week's episode, and the whole, audition thing, because I wanted to raise my game a little bit, Tommy, and do the actual Actors Access application process. I didn't realize it's a little bit more complicated than I thought it would be, but it's worth the time, I think. I hope.
We're creating opportunities here on the End Action podcast. You can maybe be in Mike's show, and I'm sure as we move the ball down the field, there's going to be some opportunities on some films that I make. We want to be interactive, so remember, if you have any questions at all about the film process, the movie business, in front of the camera, behind the camera, you can always drop your comments down on the YouTube actual video. Just write your comment and say, hey, Mikey, hey, Tommy, whatever. This is my question. And on the show, we'll get right to it. And in the meantime, we really appreciate all the support. You can follow me at Tom DiNucci, just as it's spelled on the screen right there. You can follow at Tom DiNucci. I'm on Instagram. You'll see me on there all the time. I'm also on Twitter. And the big thing is what we're trying to really route a lot of traffic towards is the YouTube channel, which if you just go to your Google machine and type in Tom DiNucci, you'll see it. You'll see a picture of me kicking my feet up at a desk. That's the correct one, the one and only to please follow. And then every week you can get the show on here. A lot of people were like, "Hey, you're doing a podcast? How come you're not doing it on like Apple Podcasts, or why can't I get it on Spotify?" And the truth is, we really just want to make this a YouTube thing for now and have it just kind of stream right to the YouTube and get as much traffic here as we can and answer all your questions in one concise, easy to use way. Because remember, I told you I'm not really a tech savvy guy. So for me to even like figure out how to like broadcast to you on a weekly basis, this is big for me. We're using this StreamYard app, which Mike discovered, which is really cool and easy to use. Even Tom DiNucci can do it. So if I can do it, you can do it.
Well, Tommy, I think it's been a great show. My YouTube channel is subscribed to Mike Messier YouTube channel. Tommy and I have done some other interviews on Messier Mantra. Tommy was a frequent guest on that show. And I think we even had an interview that's a lot of fun from a Bet's a Bet going way back to 2015 or something. So, but this has been a pleasure, Tommy. This has been a pleasure being on the show with you. And I think you had some great advice and you made a really good talking about outlining. You know, Tommy himself provided an outline for this episode, which I was happy to follow because it was really good.
Yeah, we are not planning on just getting on here every week and bullshitting. We've got a method to our madness, and we're trying to help. You know, we hope that it does help. Like I said, I'm really focusing on trying to divert people from a lot of the bullshit that I heard when I was first coming up, because I'd like to think that I could, you know, time is very valuable.
Yeah.
It's an unrenewable resource, and we ain't getting any of it back.
Right.
So if I can save any of your precious time and avoid some of the bullshit that I've had to deal with along the way, then this podcast was a success. So thanks for checking it out. Remember, tune in next week. Little tip, little hint, little advanced scouting. Next week, we mentioned it a little bit. I think we're going to do a deep dive into my second movie, Almost Mercy, because guess what? We're coming up on, we shot that movie at my parents' house right back in May of, I want to say, 2013.
This is Army of the Damned or Almost Mercy, Tommy?
This is Army of the Damned. We're coming up on the nine-year anniversary of the filming of Army of the Damned, which starred Sully Erna of Godsmack. It starred horror legend Tony Todd, of course, the Candyman. So star-studded cast. I'm really excited to get into that. Wrestling fans won't be disappointed. Zelina Vega of WWE fame is in that movie. It's actually her first movie where she actually has any lines of dialogue in whatsoever. Of course, Tommy Dreamer's in that film. So there's a lot to dive into that. A lot of meat on the bone. Like I said, we shot it at my parents' house. So
if people can watch it between now and next week, be a good idea, because then they can fully appreciate everything you're talking about.
That's right. Punch in the Google machine, Army of the Damned. Not to be confused with Army of the Dead, the Zack Snyder film, because Army of the Damned came out long before Army of the Dead. I'm just kidding. Zack Snyder did not rip me off. In fact, I really like Army of the Dead. But this is Army of the Damned, and we're going to be talking about it next week on the And Action podcast. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you. We're probably going to be coming at you at a different time next week. Don't get nervous, but somebody, this guy, is going to Disney next Tuesday.
Yeah. Got to pay my respects.
He's going to pay his respects to Walt.
To the mouse.
Maybe thaw him out of ice. And no, we can't disrespect the good name of Walt Disney on the show. But Mike will be in Disney next week, right around the time we come at you. So we might drop a taped show, or we might just switch the date. We will definitely let you know well in advance. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next time.